What is going on, everybody? I'm Des with DesFit, and today let's talk about one of the biggest showdowns of 2017 for fitness wearables, and that's going to be between the big threes, the Apple Watch Series 3 and the VivoActive 3 from Garmin. Although these two are completely different devices, they actually share a lot of similarities that make them serious contenders with each other. The GPS-equipped Apple Watch Series 3 without LTE comes in pretty much the exact same price as the Slate version of the VivoActive 3. Then the performance of all the fitness functions actually was very similar between the two. And then lastly, the battery life should have been a clear winner for the Garmin, but realistically, you're only going to be able to get about 2 to 4 days out of the VivoActive 3, and then 2 to 3 days out of the Apple Watch Series 3 with fairly typical GPS usage. But still, and I know this sounds really cliche, but it's not exactly like we're comparing avocados to zucchinis. Just a note, I'm not comparing the LTE version of the Apple Watch Series 3 just because that comes in at a much higher price point than the VivoActive 3. So the Garmin is most definitely an activity tracker first and a smartwatch second, and conversely, the Apple Watch's highlight is the phenomenal smartwatch experience, but it also has a great deal of fitness features that may not be as apparent. But this video is not about choosing a winner between the two, it's more about outlining the differences between them and why you may want to choose one versus the other, and let's first start with the design. The design of each of them are completely different, so that's totally going to be your personal preference. The VivoActive 3 has a very traditional round design, where the Apple Watch has a very unique and easily distinguishable square design. The VivoActive 3's design may be more standard, but it's tried and true as well as being timeless. On the other hand, you can spot an Apple Watch wearer from a mile away, and maybe that's something you want, but maybe you don't. In terms of build quality, the Apple Watch is the clear winner here with a much more premium and solid feel. Even though the VivoActive 3 has a decent build quality, it really can't hold a candle to the Apple Watch. The 42mm Apple Watch is very similar in weight and dimensions to the VivoActive 3, but the Apple Watch does have a slight advantage because they do have that 38mm option for those of you that want a really small watch. Both are going to be extremely comfortable to wear, but I'd have to give a slight advantage to the VivoActive 3. The flush sensor on the VivoActive 3, along with its fantastic stock band, make it so comfortable to wear that you may forget that you're even wearing it. The Apple Watch's heart rate sensor protrudes slightly with its dome-like shape, and it will be a little bit noticeable when you're wearing it, although it's not uncomfortable by any means. And for those watch bands, you'll have a much wider selection with the VivoActive 3 since it uses industry-standard 20mm bands, so you'll have a wide array of bands to choose from, unlike the Apple Watch, which uses a proprietary system. However, I think the interface for the Apple Watch is a little more convenient and most likely a little bit stronger due to tons of contact area from the band to the case, whereas with the VivoActive 3, it has a small but standard band pin. The touchscreens are going to be drastically different between these two. The Apple Watch's display is absolutely stunning with vibrant colors, rich, deep blacks, tons of contrast, and its pixel density on both sides trounces the VivoActive 3 with clarity similar to a current smartphone. But it's not an always-on display and doesn't do well in direct sunlight. The VivoActive 3's always-on display is incredible in sunlight, and it's optimized more so for a little longer battery life, but the clarity is nowhere close to the Apple Watch, and pixelation may be a little bit noticeable. Color and contrast also leaves a bit to be desired, plus there's an odd bluish and purplish hue to the VivoActive 3's in certain lighting conditions. Using the touchscreen is definitely more organic and predictable on the Apple Watch, and it's just like using an iPhone, where the VivoActive 3's touchscreen feels a little bit more antiquated, with a little bit of lag as well as a little bit of jitter on some occasions. The touchscreen on the VivoActive 3 is sensitive, but it's almost a little bit too sensitive in some situations, especially when the screen is wet. Then in regards to the buttons and the other interface hardware, again, these two could not be more different. The Apple Watch has two physical buttons, which are more dedicated to overall watch navigation, and during an activity, you'll be using both buttons simultaneously to pause and resume an activity. With the VivoActive 3, you have the convenience of just one single button for those functions. But then there's going to be a big difference between the digital crown of the Apple Watch and the side swipe feature of the VivoActive 3, which both serve similar purposes. But the clear winner here is the digital crown, and it's predictable to use, where the VivoActive 3's side swipe isn't as predictable, and personally, I found it to be not as useful. With the VivoActive 3, you have a great deal of customization that you can do with the availability of numerous data pages and fields within an activity, where with the Apple Watch, you're limited to just one page with 5 fields, period. However, these are going to be the most commonly utilized data points, and realistically, this should work just fine for most people. Even for a heavy user like myself, 90% of the time I only use the primary data page, and I don't necessarily switch between data pages on my Garmin's all that often. In terms of performance for the activity functions, this is where it gets really tough because both of them actually do really well. And although the Apple Watch isn't necessarily known for its fitness features, it actually does really well and sometimes is even better than the VivoActive 3. I was super impressed with the GPS and heart rate performance of the Apple Watch, and the barometric altimeter is very accurate for outdoor activities. So for both devices, they work really well outside. However, the VivoActive 3 doesn't do as well as the Apple Watch indoors. The Apple Watch tracked indoor floors climb much better than the VivoActive 3, and that may have to do with its phenomenal accelerometer, which was also incredibly impressive with its ability to track indoor activities like walking and running on treadmills and indoor tracks with shockingly good accuracy. But there are some showstopper differences that may make you choose one versus the other. On the Apple Watch, using the native workout app, currently you can only view activity details for past activities on the activity app on the phone, where with the VivoActive 3, you can view those details for the last 7 activities on the watch itself. You can see workout details immediately after finishing a workout on the Apple Watch, but after you click done, it's not available on the watch itself. However, this could be changed with software updates. For open water swimmers, this is a pretty cut and dry choice here, as the Apple Watch has both pool swimming as well as open water, where the VivoActive 3 only has pool swimming. However, the VivoActive 3 has the dedicated native strength app, which is pretty darn good for automatic rep counting and also can identify a handful of specific movements. It's not perfect by any means, but it is much better and more sophisticated than the native as well as most of the third-party apps for the Apple Watch that are currently available. However, I really like the app Strength as it had a very clean and easy to use interface. It utilizes the digital crown for scrolling through the weight and reps quickly, and I really like the display of all the previous exercises performed on the watch itself. Definitely look for my review of the third-party strength training apps for the Apple Watch coming soon. The Apple Watch also has the big advantage of onboard music and playback, which can make those workouts without a phone a lot more enjoyable. And the other showstopper for you could be the support for external sensors. The VivoActive 3 is the clear choice that has a much wider selection of sensor connectivity options since it can pair to both Bluetooth Smart as well as ANT Plus sensors, where the Apple Watch only pairs to Bluetooth Smart sensors. Alright, so those are the differences between the watches themselves, but none of that may even matter because the choice may actually come down to the software that supports it. Garmin Connect is basically your one-stop shop for everything related to your device. It's a really well thought out piece of software that collects everything in one place, and it's easy to navigate and view all your data points, whether that may be your workouts, sleep, and tons more. You may occasionally have to use Garmin Express on your computer for software updates, but Garmin's making a lot of strides here with updates now available via Wi-Fi. With the Apple Watch, you actually have, very surprisingly, a less cohesive experience where you have the Activity app, which manages your workout and daily activity data, but then you also have the Health app, which provides more details. The Activity app basically summarizes a lot of the more detailed metrics found in the Health app. But you also have one more app that you'll have to use, which is the Apple Watch app, which manages the watch itself and the apps, watch faces, and settings. The huge advantage with Garmin Connect is that you have your app, widget, and watch face management built in. There's some other big advantages with Garmin Connect, where there's actually a community with Garmin Connections where you can challenge others with step challenges, and the Garmin ecosystem is available across all platforms, whether it be an iPhone, an Android device, or even your computer with a robust web application where you can access and view all that data that it collects. Both watches have a fairly robust availability of third-party apps, but there's a big difference between how these apps work on each platform. With Garmin, the third-party apps are primarily just apps for the watch itself, and most of them are free. With the Apple Watch, the third-party apps on the App Store are free to download, but a lot of them do have paid upgrades for premium features, which is totally to be expected considering the amount of work developers put into them. However, these can also be separate platforms altogether, such as Under Armour, which I found to be a really good app and platform, which is another app I'll be including in my third-party app review. So yeah, it's kind of interesting that these two are actually contenders with each other, and that comes down to the fact that the price points as well as the battery life are very similar, as well as the GPS heart rate and altimeter performance should not disappoint for either watch. But there are some showstoppers for both watches, such as the open water versus pool swimming advantage of the Apple Watch, the Strength app with automatic rep counting of the VivoActive 3, the much better indoor activity tracking with the Apple Watch, but then also the much wider selection of sensor support for the VivoActive 3. Overall though, the Apple Watch is going to be great for iPhone owners as it provides an insanely good smartwatch experience, but then you may find the experience with its fitness functions a little bit less great with its disjointed nature of the Activity app, Health app, and Watch app, as well as the fact that you may have to use a third-party app to get some of the features already built in and stock with the VivoActive 3. With the VivoActive 3, you may not get the looks nor the smartwatch capabilities of the Apple Watch, but what you will be getting is a really well thought out and robust, cohesive app experience with Garmin Connect, as well as a much wider array of activity profiles that provides contextual workout data, such as stand-up paddleboarding. So here's a couple last points to consider. Yes, the integration between the Apple Watch and the iPhone is amazing, but I feel like I'm kind of replicating a lot of functions already found on my phone, where with the Garmin, it's a completely different device. So no, definitely not as complimentary, but it's kind of like owning a sports car or a truck. One may be super sexy, but maybe a little bit finicky to use, and you can't really use it all the time. Where the other, it may not be as pretty, but you can always count on it, and you can pretty much do anything that you want with it straight out of the box. And lastly, if you want to switch from an iPhone to a Google Pixel or not an iPhone, your Apple Watch is most definitely going to have to go up for sale. So as they said in Indiana Jones, choose wisely, because both of these phenomenal watches do what they do really well, and each of them offers something that the other simply does not. If you've never used a Garmin, then the Apple Watch experience should be easy enough to get used to, but if you are coming from a Garmin, the learning curve may be a little bit tough, as the app experience is totally different. So there's really no clear winner here, and it's definitely not like we're comparing apples to apples. There's going to be a lot of variables to consider, and hopefully this video outlines some of the big differences between these two phenomenal activity trackers. Thanks so much for watching, and if you don't mind, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for a lot more videos on sports technology and fitness wearables coming soon.